Am I allowed to do this on camera, or do they have like
You're allowed to do anything you want, mate. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Guy with us. Lots of you would have seen Guy before over the years. And so, how are we doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. I've been hitting
And
the
by the
gym.
way, just let me mention that Guy is the fucking genius I'm always talking to you about. Uh, you see, I proclaim my genius, which I'm sure I am, but in a very different way to how Guy is. Now, see that picture behind, that one of the clown. That's one of Guy's pieces of fucking art, excellent art, and he does equal tattoos that look live other than live, more real than real, and all this. And when I look at your art, I'm looking into another dimension of consciousness or humanity. It's like having a DMT trip when I look at your art because
You want to see
it,
the DMT sleeve I did?
well, I mean, I will do one day then. But when I look at your art, I just find it unfathomable how a human being can do that sort of thing. When we've
Yeah,
been told that Rembrandt was brilliant and Van Gogh was brilliant, and no, no, I'm just not buying it. That they were. I mean, I've seen Michelangelo's decapitation of John the Baptist, and that was brilliant. But lots of these artists, particularly Van Gogh painted like a kid, and it's all hype and it's all nonsense. But
on
when I look at
marketing.
your art, things are alive. It looks surreal. It looks like these things are peeping through from another dimension. And
Maybe they are.
yeah, because the thing is, like, I once watched this 9-year-old girl. She was painting stuff like you paint with absolute realness, human faces that look real. And she never had any training. And the film crew and interviewer said, um, how do you know how to do this? And she said, well, just, I suppose God tells me how to do it.
Yeah, I understand that statement because I feel like what I do is not coming from me.
And
I
I'm
never
always
felt that.
saying, no, 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 this is the thing. I'm always saying when I'm talking, it's not coming from me because look, Guy, these things, when you are an artist, when you are creative, this stuff comes out of the creative field, the creative akasha. I don't think about any of the things I'm going to say. I don't purposely set out to say anything at all. It's just that it's always coming. And this is what it's like with composers and writers and philosophers and everything like that. And so when you do your stuff, I mean, you're ADHD and you lend yourself to many, many things. And whatever you lend yourself to, you're always, remarkably good at them. Something is certainly working through you from another dimension
I always
because you
say
couldn't have learned that stuff in one lifetime.
it's kind of like the word learning I've got an issue with because when we say we learn something, well, that's because you actively love something and you practice and practice until eventually you can get your body to do what your mind wants to. So it's the
Yeah,
body
yeah,
that learns, it's not the mind.
right. Well, that's interesting.
So what you're doing is you're tuning an instrument in order to bring through something that's much deeper.
Mm.
That's the way I say it, and everything that I do is kind of automatic now because my body knows what to do, so my mind can just get to work on projecting what it wants to project. So the thing about that is that, many creatives out there that work in the same way, you know, unfortunately, we live in a world where there are so many undervalued creative people in many different areas, people that are great with literacy, people are great with art, music, so on. And the world kind of, especially the way that the world's set up now, it kind of demands that you're not just a creative anymore. You have to be a public figure. You have to you have to be a brand. You have to market yourself to
Oh,
stand out.
yeah, yeah.
So you've got to separate yourself from, so you can't just be an artist. You've got to learn to be fake in order to get people to recognize the art. And I'm getting to a point in my life where I'm absolutely fed up of it. I just want to do my tattoos. I just want to do my art. This is what I enjoy. It's how I pass my time. It's what I want to spend my energy on. And there's many things that I'll be honest. that I get frustrated with, and that's why I kind of resonated with much of what you said in that previous video that you've just put out, because in the same way that you were putting out content that can, for some people be life changing, and for others it can be triggering, especially if they don't know what you're about and what you're trying to get them to see within themselves. And I think that this is the world that we see. I mean, the world I see in front of me is I can sit for hours on a portrait or a piece of art, and I can put a video out. I can show the process. I can show, and you might get like 100 people that like it, a couple of positive comments, and then you'll get your negative ones, people telling you it's shit, all that kind of stuff. I get a lot of that, especially during live streams. People coming in and just projecting the hatred onto it because they're jealous of the things that they can't do themselves. And I've come to a point in my life where I think I'm spending hours and hours and hours giving my time and energy to someone. And, a lot of my clients I love to bits, but there have been clients that complain about my pricing, for something that's going to last, something that is going to be on them forever, something that's maybe meaningful to them. And it's like, it's just
And
completely
something that's
undervaluing.
absolutely unique.
Yeah. And, you spend all this time and energy to try and change people's lives in a positive way. And it's just like flick next, flicks next, flick next. It's almost like you feel you have to beg people. And I don't want to do that. Please like, subscribe, please follow my content, because,
Yeah.
and this is the world that we live in. There's so much content out there from people that just want attention. And you know what really annoys me, mate? I'll give you a really example, right? My highest viewed video of all time was me walking down the canal and getting attacked by a goose. And like, there was so like, and anyway, the goose attacks me because I'm trying to get past it on a thin path, and it was quite funny, and I was swearing at it and stuff, just as in a joking way.
And,
And I flicked
just to
my
put
foot.
things into context, the goose was, protecting its young,
Yeah,
and it just wanted you out the way, but the fact
yeah.
was the goose was in the way because it was on the towpath when it should have been in the freaking water.
Yeah. So all these people are in the comments, "Oh, leave the goose alone, don't kick it," because I flicked my foot a little bit just as a joke, and I didn't
Yeah.
even touch it. I'd never hurt an animal like that. And you got all these people. Most people could see that I'd not kicked it and were defending in the comments. But my point I'm making, was I spend all this time, all this energy trying to create meaningful content, meaningful things that could be, that could inspire people and all this. And the one fucking video that does well is me almost pretending to kick a fucking goose. And this is the world that we live in. Like, nobody appreciates real, effort and hard work in that way anymore. It's just, unless you become a brand and you become fake and you have to market yourself in a certain way because it's all about what they want and what they can get from you, because I am a source for them to drain whatever they want out of me, which is why I told you about the Machiavellian approach to marketing before. And if that's the way it's going to be, and that's the way people are going to be, then I've decided that I'm going to exploit that, because at the end of the day, this is my life force energy that I'm giving. You don't get much of it. I might get 100 years if I'm lucky, maybe a little more.
Yeah, exactly. And so
And
what you got more to say?
yeah, and like, so when I hear, like, when this philosophy about the way the world is, right? We live on this little blue marble, and if you zoom out in your mind and you look at it from a distance, and the only thing protecting us from impending doom is a thin layer of gas, and you've got all these pink apes running around with all these selfish attitudes. There are some people that are very bright that shine out from the crowd, right? There are your lights, your candles in the wind, if you will, in the sea of just dullness. And this is the world as it is increasingly becoming. And I think maybe for much of history that was a facet of the world. And I always think to myself, I blamed the elites. And obviously, some of the elites are horrific people. They're probably involved in child trafficking and all these types of things, and that's abhorrent behavior. And they need to be strung up for that. But not all of them are like that. Some of them are just super rich and they've got a vision and they want to change the world. All these types of things, and I think that I try and equate it to. I'm taking emotion out of this now, and this might be triggering to some people, but I'm looking at it from the laws of logic. If I had a commune, right, and I had 100 people living on that commune, and 20 of those people were bright, happy, hardworking individuals that wanted to help each other, that appreciated each other, and then the other, 80 people were just useless and didn't want to chip in, you'd want to get rid of them. and he'd want to replace them for good people that had helped the commune thrive, not bring it down. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, the world is a commune.
Yeah.
And there's only so much resources and capacity for people, because if we released all of the cures for the world, and we released and we created a positive society where everybody got good food and everybody was kept away from things that tempt them, like cigarettes and substances and alcohol and all these things, then all of a sudden we become completely and utterly overpopulated, and then we'd have to find new ways to depopulate people before everybody goes down on a sinking ship.
Yeah.
So if I had billions at my disposal, I would feel that, considering that I'd now earned myself and worked myself into a position of power, maybe whose responsibility is that?
Mm.
Like, ask the question, whose responsibility is that? Do we go and have to depopulate in one way, or do we create a society that allows people to make their very own decisions for themselves in order to reduce the population? Because for me, what you're doing is you're saying, all right, have everything you want. And if you want to be self-destructive, that's on you. I'll profit and benefit from that. If you don't want to be self-destruction, it's destructive, you won't listen. You'll go out and you'll source organic food and you'll work hard, and you'll be a good conservative individual, and you'll contribute to society, and you'll pay your taxes, and you'll do all these things, right? And I think that we need some kind of economic system to drive people to work, and we need some kind of worker ant, and we need some kind of leaders, and maybe that's not always the way that it should be. Maybe some of the leaders are bad, and we need war. Because if we didn't have it, guys, then everybody gets overpopulated and the planet's just even a worse state, right? And I know there's a lot of fantasists out there. Yeah, but maybe we could populate a different planet and develop technology, because they've been back in. There's not proof for that, to be fair, not really. I mean, I think it might be real, but I don't think there's any proof for it. So, from a philosophical point of view, we have to self manage ourselves. Whose responsibility is that? Now, if we were responsible enough in our own lives ourselves and stopped taking so much and giving so much back, then maybe we'd live in a world where we wouldn't have to be governed by the elites and by whoever wants to govern the world and fix everything, because we wouldn't be consumers, we wouldn't be useless eaters, we wouldn't be weak-minded individuals, we'd be strong, disciplined individuals. We would decide amongst ourselves how many children to have, what we want to contribute, and this is the thing. So, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to get triggered by that video that you've put out, but I don't really think that they actually see overall, especially when you watch all your other videos and see what you're about, that actually there's positives and negatives to both sides. And like, for me, I completely and utterly believe that, based on logic and reason, not whether you like it or not, because that's just your emotions speaking. Logic and reason dictates that, this planet, it might harbor another 8 billion people at this point, but eventually it's going to tip over. It's going to grow exponentially. And if we start, right, making everyone healthy, right, and if we start, like, creating this utopian society that everybody so desperately needs, how long is that going to last before there's too many people and it all just turns to shit?
Yeah. I don't think the human nature would allow for utopia. Because even when we've seen places where there haven't been any governments or any measure of control, and um, there's always been war, there's always been aggression, and that's just who we are. And if you look into the Amazon jungle sort of people, we know even those, there's photos and films of them from when light aircraft flew over for the first time, and these Indians are shooting arrows at the plane. And so it's human nature, and so we're never going to find a utopia. We're always going to have our disagreements. We're always going to be xenophobic
But it's
to a
not just
degree.
human nature, it's the nature of the
Yeah,
jungle as well, mate.
it's the nature of the world, and
Animals
so
do it.
yeah. Now that video that you was mentioning, just so I can get things into context, I'm just looking at the title: "How to Avoid Worldly Suffering." Are you here to evolve your consciousness? Then listen to this. Now, I said in there that basically the world needs controlling. people need culling just like all other animals. And you see, look, we've all got different opinions about things, and some people being leftists and just they don't have the intellect to see the broader picture. It's all emotionally based. Well, anyone that's emotionally based, so, oh, we should protect each other and protect the weak, and the weak are valuable, and all human life's valuable. Okay, well, if you think that, do you eat meat? Do you eat fish? Well, shouldn't all life be valuable then? Why are you just protecting the human being and allowing the human being to kill off every other single creature, plant, and animal on the planet? So your argument's not standing up. The argument would stand up that we absolutely have to manage the human being. We have to kill them because the human being is the most destructive animal the world has ever known, and left to its
That's
own
true.
devices running wild, it would be a festering cesspool. And so it most certainly needs managing. And I'm always saying I am absolutely 1 billion% in the camp of the global leaders. Now, the small minded perception of the vast majority, because they don't know anything about anything, they've heard a little bit about Epstein and, oh, they're all paedophiles. No, they're not all paedophiles. And if you even looked into this whole Epstein case, the vast majority of these women were 17 and 18. Now, in lots of states in America, the legal age for sex isn't 18, which is completely and utterly absurd. When girls start menstruating at 11 or 12, they're ready to give birth, and in lots of third world countries they do. And I've travelled through Africa and Asia, and I've seen many young girls with babies. That's just how it is. In the Western world, they don't want it to happen like that because they want to manage the numbers and they want to ensure that there's an opportunity for the young women to at least go out and get a job and earn some of their keep for some of their time rather than just producing children. And so there's so many things to speak about, but I'm pretty sure, in actual fact, I'm very confident that the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates and George Soros and all these people, they know a whole lot more than the vast majority of people know, and they are looking at the figures. They're looking at the longevity because they have the resources to compile vast amounts of data. When you go onto the World Economic Forum site, it's got just about everything you could conceive that's taken care of. When you go on, there's got like a wheel and it's got a billion subjects, and then you click on one of these subjects and it goes into another wheel with a billion subjects, and then you click on one spoke of it and it goes into another billion subjects, and they've just gone down to the minutiae. And so they've got people giving forecasts and everything of the resources and population growth and management. And uh, there's concerns there. There's absolute concerns, and I'm with them all the way. They're not going to get everything right, and how much will they get right? But at least they're trying, and sacrifices need to be made. There always has to be a culling involved because there always is with other animals. Now, when any other animal starts to infringe on what we think is perfection, we deal with them ruthlessly. We'll put poison down traps, we'll introduce other animals to kill them, and all the rest of it. And so I am not excluding the human being from that facet of action on the planet. I don't think they are more important. In actual fact, I think they're vastly less important because they're the ones that are going to be destroying all life on Earth left to their own devices.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that we learn about the nature of human beings. Again, coming back to the whole differences in age of consent around the planet. I think the UK is probably I think 16 for a certain age group probably is an acceptable thing. I mean, for me, any younger than that, ugh, no. But
Yeah, but guy,
although they can menstruate, I get what you're saying. But like,
yeah,
but
but
the point,
look, in the 60s, in Britain, the age of consent was 15. And
yeah,
when Jerry
it's,
Lee
it's
Lewis married his 13-year-old girl in one particular state, he couldn't marry her in the state they were from because the legal age was 15 there. So he went to another state where the legal age was 13. So we have to remember that only a few years ago, the age of consent was much lower.
Yeah, all right. I understand. I think society maybe have decided what's acceptable, maybe with that. But my point I'm trying to make here is coming back to uh, well, with the human race, right? We're obviously still in a state of infancy in some ways. I think in terms of if you look at the development compared to what it might be like on some other planet somewhere else, we've got a lot of things we've got to learn. But we seem to think it's all right to go out there and control animal populations and all these things. But yet, when it comes to controlling human populations, we all have a problem with it because we're all so protective of each other in certain ways, maybe. But at the same time, there's an incredible amount of human beings that requires an incredible amount of resources. And if we, allow that to grow, then it creates an incredible amount of population. So again, things like the elites or the powers that be turning around and saying, okay, in America you got to be 18. That obviously cuts if for
Only in
me, I
some
think
states
any
it's 17
yeah.
in others.
So for me, I think if you're going to have a baby, you need at least some life experience and the ability to consent to sexual activity to a point where if you fully develop, your brain's fully developed, you know what you're getting yourself into. You're going to be a positive mum. So I think we've understood that. But when it
Well,
comes
okay,
to
well, let me just interject there. How can a 16-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old know exactly what they're getting into when they have a child when they've never done it
well,
before?
they can't. But I suppose I mean, personally, I think that the way that we look at that, if as a 40-year-old, I'd find it very uncomfortable sleeping with anyone of half my age. I would find that uncomfortable. Even a 20-year-old,
Well, why is that?
25-year-old.
Because of your social conditioning?
Not necessarily, because the way women that I'm interested in, I like the idea of a woman having life experience and have being able to have developed herself into someone that's going to be, to me, a positive and strong partner. And I think that young people, obviously, it's. I think what puts me off with that, even young people of consent don't have the life experience, and I don't find that to be an attractive mate. So for me,
Yeah, okay, well,
the only reason that I wouldn't do it is because I feel like at that point, then I would, as a man, I would be succumbing to my sexual desires in order to sleep with a younger person, which for me goes against my spiritual practice in many ways, because I'd just be succumbing to something that allows me to basically objectify a woman in a way that is negative in my that's the way I feel for it. Now obviously people have different opinions on that, but for me I find women older. When I was younger, obviously it was different. I wanted girls at my own age and all this kind of thing. As I'm older, it's kind of similar. So I've always had girlfriends that are pretty much the same age as me. I had one girlfriend that was like I think three years younger than me at one point, but yeah. So for me, I think with that, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but I think there's a good reason that we have to try and look at that issue. But the issue here that I'm talking about is it's not really to do with that. It's to do with the controlling of the population. I mean, if
well,
anything, if you up to the age of consent to like let's say 20, would that not help to keep the population down in any areas anyway? Like, would that not be a positive thing to do? I
well, I
don't know.
mean, why would it keep the population down? Why would a girl having sex at 18 rather than 16 make them want to have less babies because they're 2 years older when they start?
Well, if they let's say it was illegal to have like in America to have sex before you're 18, and there'd be less girls getting pregnant at 16. So that shaves 2 years off. So to me, that'd be less babies, in a way, would it not?
Well, I mean, the question that I'm posing is, or posting, well, just because a girl doesn't have sex at 16, when she could have two babies during that 2 years, well, when she has sex 18, well, she could have 10 babies
Mm.
within the next 10 years. So
I
that
mean,
doesn't really
there
make
is an
any
argument.
sense.
There is an argument though that we're not actually overpopulated yet as well, and that we should be encouraging more people to have babies. But I think that argument is a per capita thing for different cultures. So on average, if you go over to like Islamic cultures, they're having far more babies than white cultures. They've got different views on that. And we frown upon that as a
And I'm pretty
society.
sure in many Islamic countries, you can marry women at 13 years old, girls
Yeah.
at 13 years old. Well, look. What we've got to do, and what I hope we can do is we put our personal feelings and cringes out of the equation, because all that does is just leads into projection. Now, what I want to bring into this is that I've studied
But
this.
to me, it's a child, though, isn't it? A
Well,
13-year-old,
no, it's not a
not
child.
fully developed.
Well, it depends where you go, Guy. When I was in Africa, I read a lot of African history, and I traveled through the villages. And in the villages where they live in straw and mud huts and all that sort of thing, when the natives come out to see the white man with the big posh, four-wheel drive, many of them are carrying teeny babies, 1 year old or less, and they're only looking like they're about 12 years old or 13 years old. And I initially assumed, with my naivety, that they were their younger sisters. Well, it turns out that then when I saw them actually breastfeeding, and my girlfriend, who at the time she was 18 and I was about 47. Now, my girlfriend, she started to have sex when she was 13 with her school teacher. A school teacher would pay her money. But in Africa's different, Guy. All girls
Might be
start
different, but that's fucked up, that
well.
mate.
All girls start very, very young, and when
Yeah.
you're in
I
Africa,
get that
like
they want
me,
to explore, but yeah.
well,
But as an adult, man, if let's say two young people want to get, I mean, I'd try and discourage it, maybe just for like you wait a
but
bit
but
till you're
but
old enough to
okay,
vote.
look, let's go into another epoch then, if we want to start cringing and having our stomachs turn. It was
Yeah,
well
that's an
known,
uncomfortable topic, that for me, mate. That's I've got
yeah.
very strict. Well, it's more about like for me with that, and I'll just as a finisher, like there's a certain age where you're probably more likely to be able to understand what you are getting yourself into when it comes to those activities, and dealing with and speaking to people that have had abuse as children and stuff like that. It's quite a horrific thing, like what happens. And I don't agree that in Africa that this should be a thing. And my personal view on this, based on not social conditioning, just based on the very psychology of how a child's minds works, I think that anybody that engages in any sexual activity with a child needs to be shot in a public square.
Well, okay then.
That's
So
that's my view on that one, and that ain't
yeah,
going to change that, mate. I
no.
think that's
Well, I mean, then maybe a bit of world travel might give you a bit more of an
but is
education.
that not a logical fallacy, though? Is that not like a hasty generalization, like because a bunch of people do it, and I just play devil's advocate? That doesn't necessarily make it a positive or a right thing to do. So
Well, let's have a look at this then. Okay, so let's say on the continent of Africa, for hundreds of thousands of years, this is how it was in their culture. As soon as a girl started to menstruate, she would be sold into another tribe for. I've read stories of like 150 cows and 200 goats and all this sort of thing, because women, young girls, were very, very valuable because they could give offspring to other young girls, which were chattel, Guy. So that was their culture for hundreds of thousands of years. And so, who are you, as a very naive white man, um, uh, you know, not being disrespectful, to condemn their culture and their way of life for many, many thousands of years? Now, in ancient Greece,
I've got Christian morals, or at least Christian
oh,
centrist
look,
morals.
Christian morals. Let me tell you about Christian morals. and I've been doing videos about this recent times. I look into ancient history, and I look into many of the Jesus books and this, that, and the other, and Greek scholars and everything. And at the time, I had an AI conversation about this. Well, I've had lots of them, and I say to AI, because I know what's going on, because there's some scholars which say that Jesus was a pederast, and the reason why he said he was a pederast, because it's very likely that he was, because he was around in a culture at that time where pederastery was absolutely normal, and everyone had a young boy. All the Greek philosophers, or everybody who was anyone who could afford it, had a young boy, 12, 13, 14, and they would have them until their early 18s, 20s. And it was all about the coming of age and all this. But what it involved was older men having sex with young boys. Now, that was a cultural thing, and that only died probably about 200 or 300 years ago. So that was going on for thousands of
Thank God.
years.
Just to say thank God that died under, yeah. But,
Well, yeah,
yeah, sorry.
let me just say about this Jesus thing then. Now, um, Jesus and all of his entourage is apostles, single men traveling around at that particular time in those places, which was absolutely rife with pederasty. So the chances are it would be exceedingly odd if none of them were involved in that, and if Jesus himself wasn't involved in that, as it was so normal. Now, there is a piece in the Bible, and I think it's in Mark 14, where soldiers came upon Jesus in Gethsemane Park, and there was something going on with him and a young boy. And the young boy fled, dropping his loosely draped over gown to reveal his nakedness. Now, at that time, it is said by some of the most prominent and respected Greek scholars on the planet that there was a lot of all different sorts of drug taking at the time. And of
Mhm.
course, this Eleusinian thing went on for about 1,000 years. Some people think like all the Eleusinian, cult things were taking ergot and everything was about 300 years, but then the most extensive is about 1,000 years. So there was many people that knew about taking these drugs, and some of them were taking snake venom. So what they would do is they'd be on the point of death, but they'd have an antidote for it, or an antidote.
Mm.
And what that snake venom would do would enable them to die momentarily, so they could see what's on the other side, and then they'd be fed in their mouth, whatever, this antidote, and so they would come back from it. So there was a whole bunch of stuff going on that the vast majority of people don't have the stomach to get involved with, and they think that Christianity is all this fluffy Jesus guy that is whiter than white and wasn't fucking a prostitute and small boys, when the chances are that's absolute bollocks. So anyway, this is a very sensitive subject for the ignorant, and so and it's not palatable for anyone. So there's no real point in discussing it. But I discuss it in my videos because I'm not interested in what's palatable. I'm interested in what was so called to be true and happened at the time, and to shatter
Mm.
all the illusions and delusions that people have about a fluffy Jesus. Because I've read many of the other scriptures which were found in the Nag Hammadi and Dead Sea Scrolls and lots of other places which depict a very different side of Jesus.
Yeah. I think we've just, maybe developed as a society, we've become more intelligent, more conscious, more understanding of the human mind and, the nature of consent and things. And I think a lot of these, personally, my view is a lot of these third world countries that probably engage in that today. Well, let's just put it this way. If you go over to Islam, and this is not a racist statement or anything like that, but there's actually a very high percentage of interbreeding. So that significantly actually does, and this is a fact, you can Google it, reduce the IQ of people who practice Muslim religion. And for me, if you've got an entire society that are still, a lot of Muslim societies that are still engaging with children, um, I'm not saying they all do that, but it does happen statistically, then is that not down to not understanding, the nature of consent with children and all that stuff? That was my point. But if you want to pivot to another issue, I just think for me, understanding how a child's mind and psychology works, I think the data's out and the cat's out of the bag on how that impacts negatively, which is why as a society, as we've grown, we've stopped those types of practices. So for me, I find that extremely uncomfortable to talk about because there's not a single shred or fiber of my soul that would ever support such a thing, even if it was considered normal in a certain society. So, and I know you probably would never, advocate for that, yourself. I think we're talking about it from a societal and philosophical point of
Yeah,
view. I
because
understand
it
that.
was a long time ago, but, we can't be
Yeah.
just little people all those years ago just because we've got certain society constraints. Now, I've just looked on average age of consent in Islamic law, and it's between 14 and 18, depending on what country. And so if I looked into this deeper, I'm pretty sure that I will discover in the less educated Islamic countries, it would be very, very low.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be on the front page of Google because people just wouldn't want to be seeing that. But if you delve into it, you're going to find that. So it's still going on all over the world. And it's a good thing now in modern societies that at least, girls can leave school before they have a baby so they can
Mm.
finish their education. And with contraceptive, they can have a few partners and, learn a little bit of, about the opposite sex and seeing which, one feels better and is more conducive and all that, rather than arranged marriage and you live your life in an absolute hell because you can't stand the bloke that's humping you every night. So it's of course it's very, very complex, and of course it is, because the human being is complex in every single realm.
Yeah, it is a complex issue. I think, coming back to the elite thing as well, and just to tap this off as well. Um, if I had if I was a member of a one world government and we finally, they finally got control and managed to control all countries, I think I'd equalize it across the board and I'd get my best, knowledge and understanding of what an appropriate time to allow, to say when a child becomes an adult to make those decisions. I would probably lean towards maybe I'd keep it at 16 to 18 personally, because when you look at the development of a child to an adult, we tend to find that parts of the brain have not finished developing before then and all these types of things. So and obviously people develop at different rates, but you can't just like say, oh, you're gonna have to have a brain test before you're able to go and consent to something. So we have to find a marker or a point in which that's acceptable. And I think that in the UK, 16, yeah, maybe 17 would be better, but like for America, 18, I'm cool with that. But yeah, so the thing is, and I think we've kind of pivoted away from the original point with this. I just wanted to address it because I didn't want any of the viewers kind of watching that and going like, what, there are things that, I think that could be very, very damaging to say. Words are powerful. They're like, that's why we call them spells or spelling. And you've got to be careful how you approach these topics. For me, especially, I've got to be careful of what I talk about with these things. And, I just say that, if anybody advocates for anybody that's not fully developed and still a child to engage in marriage and, sexualized behaviors and that, then I would be the first one to put a stop to that if I was part of this government, if you will. So, yeah. So in one way, I think that's a good thing. In another way as well, when we come back to the original point at hand, when it comes to depopulation, well, it sounds evil to people because they don't understand the ins and outs of the argument to say, well, somebody needs to take up the responsibility to keep the population down. Now, some people will argue, and there is a good argument to suggest that we're actually not overpopulated. Well, certain societies are not overpopulated. You look at the number of children that in Islamic societies versus like Westernized societies, and there's a big difference between that. So it's almost as if we've gone a little bit too far. And I think a lot of that has come along with these liberal ideas and feminist ideas, where we're not, with the depopulation aspect that's coming from the elites has kind of created this liberal feministic idea that having children is a bad thing until you're like age 40. And I've always said that your best time to have children is in your younger years. Not necessarily as young as 13, but in your younger years before you go out and get your career. Because if you go out and get your career like straight away, because you want to be a strong, independent woman, and you deny the idea of a nuclear family, which is a Christian national value, which I agree with, regardless of whether Jesus was a bad person or not. The values themselves, the structure that you can actually get from the value. If you listen to like people like Andrew Wilson, he's quite interested on that one. Actually, I'll send you a link. But so he tackles atheism.
Yeah. By the way, I never said Jesus was a bad person.
Oh, right. Okay.
No, at that time, it was perfectly acceptable. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, at
So
that time, yeah, they didn't know any better. All right. And if he
no,
was engaging
it's
in
not
that,
that they didn't know any better. That's we're just looking at it from the perspective. It's only a perspective that we've got now, Guy. And we could be as a race, as a species, in 50 years' time. In actual fact, it could change on a fucking sixpence. If governments decided that we needed more population, then they would reduce the age of consent in a fucking instant if it suited them. And all of a sudden, all the morals, there'd be
you don't think
finding.
that's already a thing that they're trying to do? Because look,
Yeah.
when you look at this woke liberal side, I mean, they're even trying to ban in like pedophiles as like maps or minor attracted persons, and
Yeah.
trying to like glorify it in some way. And I just think that's abhorrent. It's
Well,
just
yeah, of course. This is
impersonal.
what the liberals do. But where I'm always coming from is try to broach all these conversations without any biases and without any emotions. And I'm not getting stirred up about anything because I think this and I think that, because it's got nothing to do with what I think. It's about what actually is happening and what's happened, and all of the variables in between. Because as soon as we get involved with I'm a Christian and that's not my values, well, you're not thinking straight.
So yeah, I get what you're saying, but it is a sensitive topic for a reason, and it's
Yeah,
like
for a reason. That's right, and I
because
know
it's
the reason.
children,
And I
it's
know the
children.
reason.
We
I
want to
know the
protect
reason,
children. I
right?
think that's
I'll speak to you about that another time because I already know the reason. And so yeah, we do that offline. But okay, let's get back now. Now I heard Bill Gates. In an interview only a few days ago, advocating for the euthanizing of the elderly when they would go in hospital with a relatively serious disease. Because his whole, what can you say, the premise where he's coming from is that it's only a matter of time before these people die. They have no quality of life. And so, well, you may as well help them along the way whilst you've got the opportunity. They're in and out of hospital, they're 78 years old, they're a bag of bones. Well, do what they did during COVID. They used a certain something which we can't mention in this video. And it began with an M. An R, sorry, and ended with an M. Ram, Daz.
yeah,
And so Rem, that one. The one that they were injecting them so they never came out of the hospitals.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know which.
Yeah.
So, but if is that not just like murder though? Like if you know
Well,
like surely they should have the option to go. I want to die, and then that's euthanasia at that point.
But then in the one
I'm
breath they should
challenging
say,
you today, Aaron. I love you to bits, but I am challenging
yeah,
you on
of
some of
course,
these.
yeah, challenge me. Is it murder or is it mercy? Now there's the thing.
Well, it's murder.
Okay, oh, your mic's gone off.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
No, you pulled the wire out or something.
Hello.
That's it.
Hello. Oh, bloody
Yeah.
hell. No, it's murder. I think it's murder because if you take someone's life, regardless of how sick they are, without them consenting to it, then that's murder, isn't it? It
Yeah.
might be a merciful murder, but it's still murder. Legally,
Yeah.
it's murder.
Yeah.
Now, people do advocate for murder, and abortion's murder. It's still a
Yep.
human being. It's not an inanimate object.
Yes, and
It's not an
so,
inanimate object. It's got its own DNA.
all women, have, the power of murdering under license
Hmm.
if they live in a country which is,
Yeah,
le
it's all right
abortion
to
is
murder a
legal.
child. It's all right to murder a child because it's not popped out yet, and you can't find out when it's viable.
Yeah, so, I mean, in
And that,
my estimation, Guy,
yeah,
that, if anything was gonna be illegal, that most certainly should be illegal because you've got new, fresh life,
which is
whereas when you've
going
got
to do
one
well.
which can't walk, can barely breathe and all that, I I don't
I
I'm
mean,
not the most compassionate of people. I'm much more rational, and logical, and I just think, well, what is this person gonna do when it gets a little bit better and the hospital need the bed and they're not fully recovered? They'll never be fully recovered because they're too old. They put them in a fucking wheelchair and they push them out, to whatever carers come to pick them up, and they get the next one in, and that's how it is. It's just a fucking a farm, and then these old people go home and like they live in this building here. They've got 3 carers coming every single day, 3 times a day, an enormous amount of resources, and then one of
well,
them, she
let's
had
play dev
the paramedics, outside, sitting outside at least 3 times a week for the past 2 years, just wasting their time, wasting resources.
mm,
When these paramedic people and vans, they could have been needed in a serious
yeah.
pileup on the motorway or something like that. But no, sitting outside a silly little old lady's house because she had tummy ache.
So let's say somebody who has contributed massively to the planet, done amazing things, gets to that point in their lives. Would it be okay to unalive that person without them, without them or even their family sort of consenting to that? That's
Well,
the question.
I think the most reasonable thing is, of course, which is what British government was considering, and Australia's doing it, Canada's doing it, and there's a few European
I'm
nations
all for
doing it.
euthanasia. I just think that, you couldn't just go around being like, "He's dying, he's dying, but he's not gonna last
Yeah,
long. It's just gonna be," and then
but
just
you,
go and
Guy,
inject them without saying anything.
but
That's
you,
like,
you but yeah, but Guy,
that's
you know they did. You know they did.
you are, yeah, I
Not
know they
not too
did.
long ago.
Yeah, yeah,
That is out. Everybody knows what was going on. They
yeah.
did that. That was a
Yeah,
policy. So
they called it, well, it began with there was a lockbox involved, and there were certain amounts of these drugs that were being administered that led to people that were falsely categorized as having COVID due to this fraudulent test. But that's still, I think that's completely and utterly abhorrent. It's wrong. But I'm all for, like, if somebody's suffering, to ease their suffering if that's what they want. If they're unable to consent to that, let's say they're in a coma, then obviously there's the time where they'll have to switch a machine off, let's say, or something like that, and that's the thing. But to be taken out because you're no longer a use after living your entire life being useful, and where do we draw the line between the people that deserve it and the people that don't deserve it? Now, if you're a criminal and you've done horrible things and you've hurt children in negative ways and stuff like that, and then you get to a certain age where you're withering and you're useless to anyone, fair enough. But then in that case, I think you should just be strung up anyway, even before you get to that point.
well,
So
okay,
I'm
okay.
all for that.
Let me stop you here. Now, that's because you've got strong views, because you're emotionally involved with.
But it's not based on emotion necessarily. I know there's some logic, and I always say this: logic doesn't lie. It's like maths, right? You can use the three laws of logic to say, like, logically, right? If a person's suffering to death and they're no use to anyone, then kill them. That's logic. But look, logic has its place, and you can't escape it. But also, we are emotional creatures, and logically, if somebody found out that even though their grandfather was suffering and some guy came along and just injected him and unalived him before you got to say your last words or whatever situation you're in, then that would create an immense, even more amount of suffering for the people that had to endure that because it was never an agreed upon decision and it just feels like a murderous thing. So logically, you'd say don't do that because you want to reduce the amount of suffering. Surely, I mean, so if the goal is to reduce suffering, Why create more by doing it the wrong way? Why not advocate for euthanasia to do it the right way to create to
Yeah,
create less suffering?
yeah.
That's just the point I'm trying to make. You know.
Yeah, so I think that people should be educated from a young age in relation to euthanasia. Because then once they are aware of it, they become used to it, and it's nothing strange to them. Then it will be much more easy to accept it and to give the go ahead if you are the only family member or the senior family member who gets asked, "Shall we unplug this person?" Like they always do in a hospital. Shall we unplug him? And then you have the option of saying yes or no. So if the euthanasia was an actual legal thing and people were educated about it and it was readily available for people. Now, this old woman that used to live next to me, I used to go and sit down with her and have a cup of tea, and she was compass mentis and everything, but she was flat bound. And she used to tell me, I haven't been out of 2 years. There's no point in me living. Yeah, I'm just getting sick and I'm ill. And she was highly frustrated and angry and just whinging all the time and making her daughter suffer, who was coming around, every day with this bit of shopping, that bit of shopping, the fags and the whiskey and all that. And so the daughter, who was like 60 years old, she wanted the mother to die because she couldn't stand it anymore.
Mm.
Her life was just passing her by because all she was doing was flogging a dead donkey.
I think
Um,
that's why old people always say things like, "I don't want to be a burden all the time. I don't want to be a burden." You hear that? I hear it a lot, and I get that. But I've always said, look, if you've lived your life and you've been positive and you've earned your place and you've brought two, children into the world and you've given the opportunity, and then the children get to a certain point where you're dying, and they don't want the responsibility of at least giving something back because you're talking about giving back to society in your video, then I always say, well, stop whinging about it. They brought you into the world. It's only a short period of time, and go and look after your mother until she's passed away, and stop feeling like it's a burden. And stop. It might inconvenience you in some way or whatever, but at the end of the day, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your mother and or your family. And at least then, if euthanasia was an option, you could just say, look, if you're suffering, mum, we can take you, we can end your suffering, and then you've got the option to do that. So I'm all for that. I think if I was, I mean, I've always said if I get old and decrepit and I can't do anything, if I'm on a machine, just switch it off. I'm not going to come out. Fair enough. But I'm not going to just suffer needlessly,
no,
regardless of what I've
yeah.
contributed.
So if we
But I
know,
wouldn't want someone to do it without my consent.
no,
That's the main thing.
so we avoid that one as decent, intelligent societies. We know, even though it isn't avoided when certain things happen, it's the first thing that the government in
Mm,
place. Let us not
mm,
make no bones about it. And when the governments want to introduce it, well, I mean, you got people like David oh, they're trying to kill all the old because it's costing taxpayers money and this. Yes, it is. And there's a little old woman that lives next door to me. She's housebound. She hasn't been out in the 7 years that I've lived here, save for a couple of occasions when she needed to go to hospital.
mm,
And all I see is an old claw coming to the curtain and pulling it back. But she's got nurses going there 3 times a day, filling her full of shit to keep her alive. What's the point? There is no point. It's just ridiculous. And so there's a house shortage. Young people without homes, they can't afford to buy their own homes. Why? Because people are getting older and older and older and clogging them all up. It should
Can
be
I play
out the
devil's
door.
advocate on this one?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
I mean, look, you say what's the point, right? Okay, so my partner's parents are really old, and they've worked hard and they've contributed and brought a positive family into the world, and obviously without them I wouldn't have met Ellen, and they're suffering, right, in some ways, in many ways, and they're on a lot of medications and they're in and out of hospital and they're not very mobile and all these types of things, and it's easy to look at that and go, well, what's the point in going on, right? But there's obviously a part of them that at this point still wants to go on, even if it is so painful, because life's pain all the way through. It just gets a little worse as you get older. And there's a lot of people that go through pain even when they're younger and want to end their lives, right? Unfortunately. But like, this is the thing, right? The point is, right? Let's say if I could take away a person's suffering, all of the suffering that they've ever experienced, if it meant they never get to experience the one positive thing that they've experienced, like maybe the birth of the son or whatever, nobody would ever say, take away my suffering if it meant I never got to have my child. Not really. On
Mm.
average, there might be some people. I mean, some people give up the kids, but on average, you'd find that most good people would say, there is no way that I would not have my child and experience that and experience the positive brief moments with them, even if most of my life is suffering, if it meant I'd never had my suffering, right? So in that case, then, when I go over there and I'm making them laugh and they sit down and they enjoy my company, right? Does that not make it all worth it? Does that make, considering they've contributed so much, does that not make it kind of worth the burden that that might cause onto society, and all this tax that we're paying? They've paid tax their entire life, working hard. Some people don't. So the question is there a line? How do we define who's deserving and who's not deserving? And I think when it comes to criminality and people who are really horrible to other people, maybe there's a strong line there. But after that, it becomes arbitrary, doesn't it? So, like for me, I understand what you're saying. There has to be some level of population control, but looking at old people as just useless eaters that don't contribute to anything, it's like, well, have they not earned a bit of free time, even if it is hard for them? Have they not earned that? Unless they don't, and if they don't want it for themselves, fair enough, euthanasia. But like for me, I don't know. I just don't feel like it makes logical sense to advocate for that to happen. Essentially what we're talking about. I mean, are you advocating that we just, they go to hospital and nobody gets to know about it, and all of a sudden they receive some kind of treatment that unalives them, or like I'm a little bit confused on like what the whole point of this argument is really regarding that, because euthanasia, fair enough, but like governments getting involved and tricking people into taking a jab where they might be too weak to respond to, or the tricking them
Yeah.
into having a certain, that's just, to me, that's just murder. That is, and if these people, these elites or whatever, feel that that's justified for good, hardworking, tax-paying people that literally built the foundations of everything that they hold and everything, they've built the foundations of their ivory tower, essentially, then that's, to me, it's like, that's some evil stuff, man. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it happens all over the world, and it
Mhm.
happened very recently. So we can't say that was in the old days. So we know it is still in the minds and the hearts of the leaders, very very powerful people. And if it's in the minds and the hearts of the leaders and powerful people, it's also in the minds and the hearts of people who are not in a position of power. Now, what I would say is, in relation to these old people, like your girlfriend's parents, ask them if they want to live. And present to them the option and educate them how gentle it is, how soft it is, because there's programs going on like this already. And Bill Gates says, well, look, if people were educated more into religion and they felt much more comfortable in an afterlife and they really did believe in God, then surely passing over wouldn't be anything like as difficult as the insecurity. Now, one of the things I know is when I speak with old people, and I live in an old people's home, and so there's lots around, and I say to them, so how do you feel about dying? And they go, bruh, never think about it. Never think about it. Okay, so the complete and utter automaton. I asked one of them, he's like 78 years old, all standing outside the door, smoking his roll ups, all day long, basically, skinny as a rake. It's amazing how he continues to live. And I say to him, so how do you feel about dying? It's like, well, you gotta go, ain't you? And then he just continues smoking his 60 a day. And so what I'm saying is, guys, I don't think old people value their life anything like as much as you value it or think they value it.
Yeah. It's an interesting philosophy, but if that one guy says that, is that not yet another logical fallacy and a hasty generalization that all old people think like that?
Well,
Because
no, but I spoke to lots, and lots do. And so, if lots feel like that, then look, there's other things I mentioned in my videos, and I mentioned it in the one that you watched today. I said, look, if you've got a vastly overweight person, and this person has done nothing but eat all of their lives until they eat themselves into a mobility cart, they've obviously got absolutely no respect for their
Hmm,
life. And
hmm.
so, why should
No, I,
anybody
I
else?
agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so why should anyone else have respect for that?
No, I understand that because that's self-destructive, and we put it down to mental health, and we always make excuses for people. But really, there are many people that have been in that state, and I think that I don't think it would be a generalization to say that there are many people that have been in that state that have probably been told what they needed to hear, not what they wanted to hear, and made positive changes. And I know that there has been one case that I know of a guy that I grew up with who was very overweight and very self-destructive, and we used to just rip him to pieces for it. And guess what? He's a personal trainer now.
Mm,
So that goes to show that sometimes just being direct with people and being honest with people and saying, look, you're fat, right? You're self-destructive, right? You're feeling sorry for yourself and you're expecting everyone else around you to somehow accommodate that. Get your ass off the sofa, get to the gym, start eating healthy, do something with your life. But the problem is, a lot of these people don't have meaning, Aaron, because if you've got meaning, you're aiming towards something. You have to have meaning. A lot of people don't have meaning. So for me, rather than just culling the population, and there's got to be some of that. I get that. There's got to be some level of control at some point. I understand that probably has to be the case. I don't like it. Maybe people don't, but is it not better to, you know, when you say sort out the wheat from the chaff, right? If we inspire people, they'll either sink or swim, and they'll
mhm,
they'll either they'll either unalive themselves through their own habits, or they'll do better and contribute to society.
mm,
So I think that this system of giving people whatever they feel like they want, give them the Netflix, give them your Coca-Cola, give them your sweets and your fish and chips and all these different things, and try to tell them that there's a cure for this and a cure for that and all that. You can profit from it. And smart people, strong people, and I think maybe most people that are having these problems probably know that they're on some level they're in denial about being self-destructive. But a lot of people snap out of it and see the light and do better. And they start to see that actually I have been succumbing to all of these temptations throughout my life that are being offered to me by people that are exploiting me. People are exploiting you by making you addicted to cigarettes. People are exploiting, but the only reason that people are getting exploited is because they themselves are deciding to allow themselves to be exploited and then blaming others for it, blaming the world for it, and not themselves. And
yeah,
if they want to carry on down that cycle, then they'll deal with themselves, and the elites know that, and that will be a contribution to depopulation. And if they don't want to carry on that cycle, then there'll be a contribution to being a positive part of the population that actually helps the rest of the world instead in some way. So I kind of see the logic and the philosophy behind that, but when it comes to actively getting involved and depopulating in a murderous fashion, no, I could never advocate for that. I think that euthanasia again is a good positive thing. But I don't think that we should have this libertarian society that teaches people that you can't even call a person fat anymore. Yeah, I'm not fat. It's a plus size individual. I see all these videos on internet and stuff, and it's like, now, mate, you're fat, right? You're fat
yeah,
because you sit and you gorge and you eat and you consume, right? And then you blame other people, and then anybody calls it out, you're in denial, and you want to call people names because you can't look in the mirror and say, look, it's my fault.
yeah,
Because it is. It's your fault.
yeah.
It is. And you've got
So
to grow a set of nuts and do something about it, or you're going to go the other direction. It's
now,
up to you, you
yeah.
know.
So we've known each other for and been friends for many years now,
Yeah, we've had
and
a good.
you've watched many of my videos, and so what would you say if someone says to you, "So, what's that Awaken Brave channel about? What's the the core essence of it. Well, he always seems to be ranting and maybe angry and boastful and all. But what's the essence of it?
I call you a little bit like this fella, Harvey Two-Face. Think about it. There's two sides because we're all light and dark. We've all got light and we've all got darkness, and there's a place for both of those things. Carl Jung knew this, and many great philosophers have known this. We all have a darkness inside of us, right? We all have that. And if you can let that out, it's called integrating your shadow. But the thing is, when you start exploring the things that people shove down, they suppress their shadows every single day, and you start talking in ways, then it triggers their demons and they get agitated and they get angry because it's a reflection. There's things that they don't like to hear because they disagree because they've got certain ideas that they've been programmed with and all this type of stuff. But the thing is, that is just human nature. There was a time in this conversation that some of the things that were sensitive to me, what you said, but I understand why you're saying them. I don't think you're advocating for these things. I think what you're trying to do on your channel is you're trying to show the reality of the world in an uncomfortable way. So hopefully one person comes along and says, well, actually, you know what? This is the way I'm responding to this person's actions is actually not his fault. I'm just projecting the fact that he might have said something that triggered me, and I'm blaming this person for what makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think what you're trying to do is kind of become a mirror to say, well, yeah, I'm here to press your buttons to show you that the only person that's truly pressing your buttons is you, based on how you choose to project onto what I'm saying. And do you get what I mean? So you become a reflection. So like you can do that with positive things and negative things. So you come out, you do your negative videos, and people will start whinging in the comments and saying that you're a bad person and saying all this kind of stuff. But I don't think they see the underlying philosophy behind it. I think what you are about, based on my understanding, is basically pushing, and you've pushed many of my fucking buttons over the years, mate. I'll be honest with you. And I've grown and I've learned through it. And I've learned that anytime my buttons have been pressed, it's just a reflection. That's all it is. So it's allowed me to deepen my spiritual practice. It's allowed me to understand that, my program disagrees with your program, so I'm going to make a problem out of it because it doesn't like it. But really, that's just the ego just doing its thing. And I think what you're trying to do is push past that to get people to understand that it is just an egoic response. And I think you're a provocateur, and provocateurs are pretty much there to provoke you into seeing something deeper than what you're provoked by. So maybe that's what that's all about. That's the way I perceive the channel. That's why I've always been quite fascinated with what you're about. I'll be honest to you viewers. There's been members of my family. There's been friends and stuff that have seen Aaron's content. I've been accused of being dragged into a cult. That was funny. No, I've been, they've been saying, oh, he's dangerous. He's got dangerous ideology. Stay away from him. I've had all this kind of stuff, and I've always stuck around, except for a brief period, which we'll not get into. But I understand that is a provocateur, and what you see on camera, right, is what Aaron does from a philosophical standpoint. It's his way of kind of speaking in a way that it's supposed to do that stuff. But when you meet him in person and you get to speak in person and you get to understand what he's about, I'd say a very different vibe. So like, yeah, it's interesting, and I think I recognized that even from day one when I first discovered your channel. When you talk about like astral projection and stuff like that, and looking and exploring the world, and everything was just being built in the early stages. And the more and more you've developed, the more and more that shadow aspects come out. And a lot of people said, "Oh, he's losing his mind. He's going crazy. He's being really negative and all that kind of stuff." But look, guys, the more and more you start learning about, the truth of the world, philosophy, and all this type of stuff, philosophers are very lonely people. Well, they're not lonely, but they live very isolated lives. And the reason being is because people can't be around them, because they are literal reflectors of their own ugliness, really, in a way. So in order to be so comfortable around someone that is philosophically provocative, um, shows a level of conscious awareness that goes beyond any of those facets of the ego. So have I kind of almost hit any nails on the head there? Or
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if given um, a broad overview, and of course, it's I'm an exceedingly complex person, very multifaceted, very dichotomous, interchangeable. And in one video, I will be an advocate of everyone living together in harmony, and then the next video, I'll be an advocate of Bill Gates with his euthanasia and this, that, and the other. And people will think, hang on, you've just completely done a 180. And I say, well, look, what you have to try to comprehend about me is that I'm not an advocate for any of these things I say. I'm not a believer. I don't have any horse in any race. I am just saying stuff. And
Mm,
this is why I say there's no truth. And so I can't possibly be speaking any truth. I don't believe in truth. And so I just say all of these things that I'm inspired to say from as many different angles. I don't have one perspective, and I'm not banging on about one perspective all the time. Throughout the years, I have looked into how beautiful all the things Jesus said, and then, in the not too distant past, I've completely turned 180 and depicted Jesus as being exceedingly different, and advocating that he, in actual fact, never cared for anyone. He was mocking everyone he came upon because of their foolish nature, and saying don't throw pearls to swine, and teaching very, very basic, silly illustrations to the masses, but something very, very different to the apostles. And then you look at the whole thing about Jesus, and it goes even deeper than that, because there's certain scriptures, like i.e. the book of Judas, which wasn't in the Bible, as one of the scriptures found later, and I don't think it was in the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Nag Hammadi, but it was found around that sort of period in Egypt, in caves and things
he
like
was
that.
rooting for Judas. Judas was his most enlightened disciple, apparently.
Yeah. And so Judas was the one which Jesus apparently imparted the deepest philosophy, and he said, "You can't be telling the others, because if you tell them, they will surely stone you." And so even what Jesus told the apostles wasn't what Jesus really knew. So it gets very, very deep, very metaphysical, and beyond the scope of the vast majority of the comprehension of human beings. And so, where I'm coming from very, very varied places, and I often akin myself to like the reincarnation of Socrates, in that I agitate everyone I come upon, and that's why they killed Socrates, because he embarrassed everyone, and he presented to them the fact that they didn't, in actual fact, know anything. And so, what am I doing on my channel? I'm doing that, but I'm not only stating, claiming, and showing that nobody knows anything. I'm saying there isn't actually anything to know. And so,
Mm,
I'm not saying that I know it all. I'm telling you that I know that there's nothing to be known. Why do I know that? Because I've delved deeper, and I haven't ever discovered any single truth. And then when I listen to the deepest philosophers and spiritualists on the planet, they'll tell you the same. And so
mm,
when you enter into a certain realm of the so-called truth, well, it's the realm where there is no truth. And you look at the world as like the Buddhists have done. The Buddhists knew it thousands of years ago. It's Maya. Don't believe in a single thing. It's all a projection from the silly egoic mind. And I'm
yeah.
always telling people to read my book, because if you had a level of consciousness and you read that book, I said today in one of the videos, you wouldn't need to know anything else as far as wisdom goes,
Mm.
as far as the human being and the knowledge of self, because that's what this whole experience is about. It's a knowledge of self. Once you've got knowledge of yourself, once you know that you're infinite consciousness, there's nothing else that you can know, Guy, because
I think that's look, people. There's a lot of people out in the world right now that can't understand objective morality, and we are well. Morals are a thing that, and I don't believe personally that morals are ideas. I think there's a lot of people that believe that morals are ideas, but if morals were ideas, then if you go over to Africa, you've got like the Kum tribes of Africa, where they're all kind of like sleeping with underage boys, and all the tribe members get to, do things, and
do
it's
it.
seen as it's seen as a great honor. It's seen as like these boys receive everyone's you know
Yeah,
life
brother.
seed up the mucky runway, right?
Yeah.
And that's wrong. I say that's wrong. And I don't say that's wrong because my idea is different to theirs. Because if my idea were different to theirs, and morality came from ideas, or collective ideas, then some people might say it's moral to do what the Kum tribes of Africa do, and other people might say it's moral to unalive people in a hospital bed, and other people, people might derive their morality from their own worldview. So I don't believe that my morality comes from any idea inside of my brain. My morality comes from something much deeper, and it comes from God, in the sense that we want to not call God as a white bearded dude in the sky. There seems to be a state of being, a state of compassion, a state of an awareness that precedes all things, of which somehow we just know whether an action is right or wrong. We just know whether it's right or wrong to kill somebody. We just know these things, but the mind can cloud that and can get in the way and come up with all these different ideas. This is one of the caveats to this conversation. One of the things I want to talk about, because when you're turning around and you say all these different things to kind of, it's, look, I know that your fundamental understanding of everything that you say is there. It's all just arbitrary egoic stuff that's designed to get people to try and see beyond, to see where the triggers lie, basically testing people's boundaries in order to show them that those boundaries are actually just a cage that they're living inside of, potentially. I understand that
Hmm.
that's essentially where you're trying to take this with people, especially with this uncomfortable conversation in the early stages, right? But I know that 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 the morality doesn't come from your ego. It doesn't come from your ego. I mean, Buddhists know this stuff. They call it compassion. I don't know if I agree with the word compassion. You say you don't have any compassion because compassion, again, is just a concept, just like anything else. I think a lot of enlightened Buddhist monks would laugh at the idea of compassion because they would know that it is, again, it's just a concept. But yet they teach compassion. But if you were truly understanding, like, let's say, Siddhartha Gautama or the Buddha, or, any other spiritually liberated being in history, then even the idea of compassion is just a concept. The idea of any of these things are just concepts. So what we're doing, I think what essentially I see you doing, is exploring good concepts and bad concepts in order to test people's boundaries, in order to show to those people that they are living in a cage of boundaries. Now, boundaries are somewhat important. There should be certain boundaries because the ego has its function. We need to protect ourselves. We need to make sure that we're safe and all these different things. But when the boundaries become attachments in the way that, anyone tests it, that you experience anger and suffering, then you're carrying the weight of what someone else has done to test those boundaries. So I'm always an advocate of forget boundaries, become boundary less, because boundary less makes you a stronger being. Your flame burns brighter, and you're untouchable because you're like the wind. The wind doesn't have any boundaries, and it moves its way through everything, does it? Doesn't it? Think about it. So when we talk about boundaries, that's just literally a function of the ego. But when you realize that you are not that, then boundaries fall away, don't they? Think about it. So in order to teach people, sorry, did that cut off? In order to
No.
teach people about that, then we have to look. Is a little example. I remember watching, the Muji guy. I don't know if you
Hmm.
agree, but he's interesting to listen to, and I like the old guys like it, my old Jamaican granddad. But one of the things that triggered his boundaries was when his guru said to him, "If you wish to be enlightened, you must vanish." And instantly, the protective measure kicked in, and he's like, "Oh, I'm being exited from the tribe." because
Yeah.
we've evolved to want to fit into a tribe. Philosophical people don't need to fit into a tribe. It's only the mind that needs to do that, because the ego is a social creature, not the true self. So if that's the case, then he leaves this retreat and he's like, oh my God, he's telling me to vanish. What does he mean? Like, does it mean I'm not welcome? And then all of a sudden he sat down on this dock waiting for his ship to come, and it clicked. It was saying that the I am, the me, the ego, the monkey mind must vanish in order for enlightenment, for Brahman, for whatever you want to name it, the nameless, formless awareness to shine through. So then the boundaries are obliterated, and then you cannot be affected by anything Mr. Awake and Brave saying, anything I'm saying, anything anybody else is saying. And I think that that is when you find true peace and true strength and become a true raised consciousness, truly awakened, that's going to be a benefit to the world. And the reason that you're a benefit to the world is because you're giving, you're not taking, you're not consuming in the way that people do. You don't need to be the type of person that has to consume and everything. So you tend to find that people that have a state of awareness, they'll help other people, but even whether it's painful or not, they'll tell them the truth. They'll become the laughing stock, they'll become the emotional punch bag, but nothing, everything just slides off, because you become a reflector, and you just
Mhm.
reflect back to people what they project onto you. And when you do that, excuse me, when you do that, people find it very uncomfortable. You become like a lighthouse. And this is a saying that I invented. You're welcome to use it. But a lighthouse does not need to jump off the rocks and drag a ship to shore. It just shines its light. And sometimes the light can be blinding and be difficult to see through. But it's there, just follow it. And that's the philosophy that I think is the highest philosophy for me, is like this whole persona that you're putting on. It's a persona, it's egoic, that it's going to trigger people and all these things. These people in the comments that are saying all these negative things, I understand why it's happening, but it's only the boundaries of the programming that's allowing you to experience that. If you can transcend that and look through and experience why this provocateur um, act, essentially, that Aaron's doing, because it's all an act. Everything right now, it's an act, really, when you think about it, because the ego is an actor. So then you can see truly what the ultimate aim is to be. And that's what I recognized in the early days. So when I'm around people and if I watch his videos, as many times, like when my partner, she'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. And I'm trying to explain this to her. I'm trying to say, look, it's trying to push your buttons to show you where your buttons are, so you can realize, hang on, I've got buttons and boundaries. Like, what are those things doing there? I don't want to be triggered and carry the anger and carry the weight of what this person said. Just let it go. Get involved in the chat. Let it go. Enjoy your life. Just enjoy being. Yeah, there's no past or future anyway. So, you reinvent yourself every day. So one day you might be a nice, enlightened being, and you reinvent yourself another day, and
I always use the little scenario from that series of the late 70s called Kung Fu, starring David Carradine. Did you ever used to watch that, or was that before your time?
probably before my time, that mate.
Yeah, it began with this Chinese American guy walking across the desert with his sleeping bag over his shoulder, often playing his flute, and the music would be,
I remember that.
yeah, okay. Every time he'd be walking from one town where he got in trouble again, the cowboys started to call him Yellow Man, and then he'd have to, beat them up, and everyone was always waiting for him to do his karate shit. And it was a fantastic series. Now, in the early stages of that series, David Carradine was a boy living in a Shaolin temple because he was an orphan. You see, that's where the orphans used to go. They used to go to the Shaolin temples. The monks used to take them in and teach them the way. And so by the time Carradine was 18 years old, and he could snatch the pebble out of the master's hand. Do you remember that bit? He said,
I
grasshopper.
don't, but
grasshopper. Okay, so this old, Chinese teacher, the master, 80 years old, blind he was, and all you could see with the white of his eyes. And he used to hold a pebble. And there was a scene, an introductionary scene, which showed Caroline as an 8-year-old boy. And he said, boy, whenever you can snatch this pebble from my hand, it's time for you to leave, which was the metaphor of whenever you've learnt the way, then it's time for you to leave. Now, when David Carradine was 18 years old and he was a man, he'd been through the initiation. There's lots of things he had to do, of course, very, very disciplined, learning all the martial arts and all that. Then he could snatch the pebble from the old man's hand, which meant that he was faster than the old man, who was the fastest of the fast because he was the guru. But it was the metaphor that he'd learnt the way. And so then, coming of age, he had to leave the monastery to go out then and to do his own thing. So I say to people, when the things I say no longer affect your ego, that's when it's time for you to leave, because you don't need to listen to me anymore.
Mm. Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that kind of approach is going to work for a very few amount of people. A lot of people are not going to see that, but the ones that do will be the ones that potentially go on to be in very bright lights in the world.
Well,
And
you know my whole approach. I'm not taking any prisoners, and I've often said that the Awaken Brave channel is a boot camp for enlightenment, or at least awakened beings. This is boot camp, and after your 18 months training or 6 months training, however long it is, whatever you will be. A proficient soldier, a proficient warrior. Why? Because you've been through all the obstacles, you've been through all the tormenting, all the bullying, and all that, and you've come out a reformed person. Your metal is, of a higher quality. Your conditioning throughout with your mind over matter and all that. That's what this treatment is in boot camp. And so, look. I say it's perfectly simple. I don't know what you guys are thinking of these days when you think everything should be fucking easy. And you think, Rupert Spear is better than you because he's kind, and Muji's kind, and Sadhguru's kind. I go, listen, people, they're all fucking frauds. And you can pay £2,000 a weekend to go down and sit at the sandals of Muji, and Muji will give you a few anecdotes and a few little stories, but most of the time it will just go and tell you that he's not telling anything really. All he's doing basically is pointing at the moon. You've got to discover the moon. You with your perception, you see the moon. He can't tell you how to see the moon. And so what I'm saying, what none of these people do, none of these people will provoke any of their students enough to really look what's going on inside. When it's all fluffy, and if Muji says, oh, well, we have to diminish the ego. And so we've got to be kind and we've got to be compassionate. Oh, please. Oh, as soon as the person walks out the fucking door back into the office, everything's exactly the same. If you touch a person at their fucking core where it is the most sensitive, they will never forget that. And that's going to be one of the lessons in life that will always serve them. That's what I'm doing.
can I add to that? Again, have you ever seen the Saw movies?
No.
So the Saw movies are a premise based on the Saw killer. Basically, he sees the sickness and the ego in society, and he sees how people can be so horrific to themselves and others, and he captures them and he puts them in these devices, right? And these devices are going to kill you in the most fucked up ways, right? Unless you sacrifice the very thing that you used to create misery for other people. And many people, even at the point of death, will still protect their ego in that, in that philosophy, until they get their head chopped off. But every now and again, there'll be one person that will crawl through barbed wire and rip themselves to shreds in order to get a key to free themselves. And because they brought themselves so close to death and have to sacrifice limbs and body parts and cut their own fingers off and all these crazy
Yeah.
messed up things, right? It's only then that that person changes and becomes a light unto the world.
Mhm.
Because people have to go through an immense amount of pain and suffering in order to come out brighter on the other side. And that is a darker kind of twist on that philosophy, which is why I thought the Saw movies were absolutely genius. That
Yeah.
philosophy is genius. I'd never advocate doing it, but let's just say, right, and I'm just going to be blunt, this is sensitive, so, you know, if you're very sensitive to this stuff, probably look away, but if you are, let's say, feeling suicidal and you want to unalive yourself, and somebody drags your ass upstairs and fills the bathtub and sticks your head in that bathtub and holds you there until you start panicking and panicking, eventually you're going to say, no, no, please, I don't want to die. Because the thing, right, that wants to unalive itself, this program inside of your mind, is not really you. And it's only at the point where you're about to die that this thing loses its bottle, it cops out and fucks off. And what's left is the true self. It's the authenticity that says, no, 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 I don't want to die. Look at the Golden Gate Bridge jumpers. As soon as they leave the bridge, it's instant fuck, what have I done? And then it changes their lives completely.
If
So
they
if you
survive.
know, so in a way, what you're trying to say is like what you're trying to do is aggravate people to the point where they can see that for themselves. But you know, it's like it's the psychological thing. People have to despair in order to change.
Mm.
We can't keep masking all this stuff. You've got to despair. You've got to know where your boundaries are so you can remove them. Now, a lot of people go, "Oh, you got to have healthy boundaries because you don't want people walking all over you or whatever." No, it's not what we're trying to say. What we're trying to say is that those boundaries are attachments, and they only exist as a part of the programmed mind. And when you can look beyond that and you can see that what you are is just all conscious awareness, having a temporary experience as this human being, then these boundaries are just they're not real. They're just this Maya. It's just the illusion. So when you see through the illusion, you're not affected by the things that Aaron says. You're not affected by the things that trigger it. Now, I've had many people that have been very upset with me over this last few years for many different things. And has it affected me? No, because I know that I'm only receiving a reflection. And you know, when we talk about minds, let's think of it this way: there's a different version of you that exists in all of the different minds that meet you, right? So which one of them's true?
Yeah,
If only
exactly.
if the way that you view yourself isn't even true. So why would you concern yourself with anyone else's delusion, including your own? That is the way I say that to people all the time. And you know, I've had it many times. I've had a young girl in the tattoo studio who was a self harmer, and she used to sit, cut her arms open. She was going through treatment, and she goes to these psychotherapists, these mental health professionals with this big book, with the DSM. This is a problem. That's a problem. This is a problem. Everything's a fucking psychological disorder. But yet, if I cut your brain out of your head and I had a look at it, I wouldn't find any of those things in a physiological way because they're all just thoughts and stupid ideas that you've got in your head and you've been ruminating over it. So you're going to walk into a psychologist's office, you're going to sit there and ruminate, deepening the problem, feeling like, you know, I say shit to people and I can prove this. I'll screenshot this stuff. I can say shit to people on a live stream in person, and the amount of times that someone's turned around and said to me, "I've had more benefit from that one sentence that you've just said than an entire years going to a psychotherapist," because I just cut past the bullshit and I tell you straight. And this young girl that was cutting herself, she was sat there and then she had all these marks, and I was going to cover them up, and that was her way of trying to, get past it and all this stuff. But you could tell she was suffering and she was still struggling. And there was a beetle on the floor, a little beetle, tiny little fucking thing, right? And it was crawling across the floor, right? And one of the apprentices that worked there at the time, he come storming through the front room, and he was about to step on it. And she says, "No, no, 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 stop." Anyway, the lad says, "Oh, what, what?" And she looked down, she says, "There's a beetle, you're gonna step on it." And she picked it up compassionately, and she took it outside, and she placed it on the floor, and I looked at her and I went, "That's interesting." And she says, "What do you mean?" I said, "You'll sit at home beating your ass up, cutting yourself to pieces, blaming yourself for all this shit that's been going on with you because it's ruminating in your mind." I said, "Like you're some kind of piece of shit, like you don't deserve your own love and affection, doing all these horrible things and, mutilating your own body." I said, "But you wouldn't even hurt the tiniest, most insignificant little creature." I said, "What does that tell you about the way that you are viewing yourself?" I said, "But the fact that you're able to show such compassion to the tiniest little creature, but you can't do that to yourself, does that not teach you something?" She started crying. And I mean crying. She was crying like big time, but not in a bad way. This was like a cathartic moment for this person. I did my job. You could see she was pondering on what I'd said. I spoke about a few other things and tried to clarify why I'd said this stuff. She came back a few weeks later and she said, "You know what, Guy? That thing that you told me has been going over and over and over in my head. And I found more benefit from hearing that and seeing that about myself than anyone's ever told me in a therapist's office." And she thanked me and she bought me like flowers and all sorts of stuff. And I said, "That's because I was fucking honest with you. At the end of the day, you're a fucking being. You were made in the image of the creator. You're a powerful being. You've got all this capacity. You've got all this flame, this light, right? But you've got this thing here that's just attached to everything, right? To the point where you're ruminating over these things and you're just beating yourself up because someone else did something bad to you. And that must mean that you're so bad that that's all you ever deserve, because why would these horrific things ever happen?" But that's not really the case. And you know what? That's so a fascinating thing to see. And it's tied to that philosophy of, um, just telling people things that they're not comfortable hearing. But right now in society, a lot of these viewers have been indoctrinated by this feministic, libertarian society where we've all got to be nicey to each other. But yet the suicide rate's just fucking rising, isn't it? Right? Because it's not helping anybody, because nobody's telling you the hard truths and nobody's trying to push your boundaries and nobody's trying to think. And the amount of time, I'm sorry I keep rambling on here, but there's times I'll see these, some of these hard left liberals running around screaming because they've been misgendered and getting arrested and that. And there's people in comments and they'll say things like, "That person wasn't bullied enough in school." And everybody's like, "Oh, that's not a nice thing to say." And I'm thinking, you know what, though? There's some truth to that. Because, if that person had been, and I'm not advocating for bullying, guys, I'm not saying this, but if that person had experienced hardships, maybe they would be less of a child about the way that they choose to conduct themselves in society. So these are the types of things that I try to tell people. If you want therapy, you've got to accept the hard truths. You've got to cut off a piece of yourself to grow. Another, just to finish this off, another thing that fascinated me was Tom Hardy when he was talking about when he spoke to Charles Bronson in prison. Charles Bronson's quite a switched on guy, actually. I know he's a violent guy, but he's switched on, right?
You're not talking
And
about the actor.
yeah, he just played him, but he talked to him, and the actor just basically it's just something that really I
No,
was
hang on.
interested to hear.
You're not talking about Charles Bronson, the actor in prison.
Oh
Somebody
no,
else
the guy
Charles Bronson.
Charlie Bronson, the dude that he's never killed anyone, but he's been in prison all his life because he's violent as hell. He said,
Yeah.
"Well, if I'm going to be a prisoner, I might as well be the best one." But anyway, so what he did, right, is Tom Hardy was going through some breakup, and he called Charlie Bronson in prison because he was doing this film about him, right? And he says to Charlie Bronson, Charlie's like, "Oh, how's everything going, mate? How's your life? Is everything good?" And anyway, Tom Hardy opened up to him. He said, "Yeah, I've been going through some hard times. There's this girl that I really love, and she doesn't love me back, and I'm really struggling with it, and all this kind of stuff." And he turned around and said, he says, "You remember the floods down in such and such?" He's like, "Yeah." He says, "So you remember that little boy?" He says, and he was trapped in his leg, and they couldn't get him out. And the water, it was rising and rising and rising, and then he drowned. And they would, and Tom Hardy's like, "Yeah." He says, "Well, that wouldn't have happened to me." Tom Hardy says, "Why?" He said, I'd have said, "Cut it off." Right? And he said, "Because sometimes you got to cut a little piece of yourself off to grow." And that is really the thing. And the one thing that I think that the best thing to cut off is this arbitrary mind that believes in past and future, that believes in all these concepts and all these silly things, and you ruminate over it and suffer over it, and then you got to burden everybody else with those problems. And strength comes from acceptance and from just letting that shit go and just looking at your life and saying, look, fucking hell, I opened my eyes this morning. Look at this amazing simulation around me. I've got the birds outside, I've got the bees, I've got these trees, everything's speaking to me. I ain't got these clouding thoughts. Everything's just there, all for the taking. All this pranic energy, I can just breathe it all in. It's all there for the taking. Look at how amazing it is. I can see the glistens on the water. I can watch the fish feeding. I can see all of these things. I can go and do my job. I can clean my house. I can do all. Look at the fucking capability that you've got every day, and you all take it for granted. So you can sit on the internet and get triggered by some dude that says something that you don't like because it stimulates the mind, it stimulates your identity, it stimulates your sense of self, and you're never going to grow until you cut that part off. And that is, I think, what I get from what you're about. So
Yeah, exactly. And I'm never going to be flavour of the month. There's never going to be too many people that are going to be thanking me for what I do. Um, but this job, what I'm doing, entails being the bad guy. I'm perfectly happy for people to think I'm a bad guy, even though the vast majority of them don't, because I get very, very little. Um, hate comments, and even the ones that are in the comments now, they're not hate. They're just like, "Oh, you knobhead," gloating on us. We're struggling out here, and it's not like back in the day. Back in the day when you get trolls, they'd say a lot of evil shit. But these days, I don't get anyone saying any evil shit, and very, very few people have got anything negative
mm,
to say about any of the things I say. They just don't say anything. And so, because they don't say anything, then I start to say more. And I start to say more what I think they should be saying and what I think they're thinking and the reasons why they're not saying stuff. And so, in the end, I have to become all parties. I have to become the viewer and the channel host, because effectively I'm only communicating with myself. And when I make some, very profound and useful videos, nobody's interested in them, Guy, because first and foremost, they might be 45 minutes long, and they just want the answer in 2 minutes maximum. It isn't in 2 minutes, it isn't even in the 45 minutes. I'm just
mm.
pointing, like Moody says, I'm pointing at the moon. You guys have got to find the answer for yourself. I'm just a guide. But
Yeah.
the levels of concentration are exceedingly small. The levels of appreciation are exceedingly small. The levels of acknowledgement are exceedingly small. Anything positive is exceedingly small. But what I can tell you in this last few days, when I've been really doing some obnoxious videos, now the views have never been higher. Now I've
Mhm.
just looked on and I've had 1,400 views in 24 hours. No, 48 hours, isn't it? The 48 hours. Let me just check that. Um,
Well,
yeah,
people love to hate, don't they? I guess.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say the hate, but the love, the controversy, and
Mm.
the entertainment, and the only thing they know, they don't know sophistication, they don't know introspection, they don't know about fancy books and philosophers and DMT experiences and all these sort of things, but they know, oh, he's got a bad attitude, oh, yeah, he's having a go at him in the comments. Let's thumb up what he says, and let's see if there's any more. And this is it. And so they tune in just to see that. And it's like what you said in relation to your biggest video, when they had something to say about what you were doing to that goose. And
Mm.
because that's the level of it, that is the level of the human being at this moment in time. And
Mm.
we may get the wrong impression. We may think, oh, there's lots of intelligent human beings. No, you just
No.
think that because the only people that are on YouTube are the ones that can actually talk. and the
Yeah.
ones that actually have read a fucking book.
That's the extent of it, you know. Like the amount of people that were saying, "Oh, leave it alone. It's just protecting its young. Don't kick it. We're going to report you." And it's like, first of all, I never kicked it. I freeze framed the shot of it and posted it. I was like, "No, I was just pretending," and I was trying to edge it back so it wasn't, you know. But the point of it I was making is really funny. Is they're all saying like, "How dare you kick that goose?" Even if I had kicked it, which I don't advocate for. It's horrible to do that to animals, and you know. But the point that I was trying to make is like you're all sat there eating a chicken sandwich while you're saying this shit,
Yeah.
and it's like you literally go to the shop, you go, "I'll pay for chickens to be kicked around all day in a chicken farm, and then kept in small tiny cages where they basically have to cut the beaks off and you know do all these
Yeah,
nasty things
and
to them."
I'll pay for a chicken
But a
which has
goose
been
is way better, you know. It's
yeah.
like, come on, like, and
These
this is the
chickens,
level of
guys,
intelligence
they
that
get
people have,
pumped
you know.
so full of steroids that they can't walk anymore, and they're dragging their arse in their own and everybody else's excrement.
Mm.
And they are eating the chicken. They've got leather belts, leather shoes, leather handbags. They've got makeup that's made from, you know, the torturing of monkeys and the killing of sperm whales and all the rest of it. It's just ignorance and hypocrisy, and it's just very, very small mindedness. And so when you say, what the fuck would you do with these sort of people? Well, I'm at the stage now, you know, what the fuck can I do? I've been doing this for 14 fucking years, and it's getting worse. It's getting vastly worse. And so, well, I mean, what is there to do? There's nothing to do. I mean, what I've been doing is trying to educate people the best I possibly can in my own way. It's a very unique way. There's a market for it. I don't believe in the other ways. I don't believe in the Rupert Spira way. I don't believe in the Muji way and the Sadhguru way and the Eckhart Tolle way. It's also wishy-washy. It's
Well,
also
they're all the
flimsy.
same way.
Yeah, they're all the same way. It's
They're all
all
they're all just like sort of paraphrasing from philosophical statements that kind of resonate with people. But then a person's ego kind of latches onto that and creates this idea that they're now spiritual. And I I don't I'm very direct with people because I think that somebody who truly understand and I don't claim anything because that'd be my ego again trying to take credit for something that doesn't concern it, but I have to speak about these things. So I'm just direct with people and people are uncomfortable with that. And if they want to be uncomfortable with it and don't want to listen, they want to stick to their delusions and they want to stay safe inside of their delusions. That's up to them, you know. And it's not through me trying to be hateful or hurtful. That's not the point. And I don't think it's the point for you. I think the point is that considering that the world is pretty much getting worse when it comes to people's intelligence and level of awareness and how we're all just living and what that's doing, it's we've got to find new ways to reach people in a way that might have a better effect. And again, it's a learning process too for even me when I speak to people. My driving force in life is to be a creative person and to, you know, not necessarily change the world, but change myself in a way that others respond to it either negatively or positively. Hopefully, you know, they might get some benefit from it. But I think it brings me to my last question that I've got for you, Aaron, is like, why are we doing this? Like, what's if somebody was to ask you, why do you do Awakened Brave? Why do you do all these things? Why do you make these videos? And if they were to, and I can answer why I do and speak about these things too. What's the goal? That's what people want to know. What you're trying to achieve. What would you say?
Yeah, well, I tell them all the time. I tell them all the time, literally. I say that I'm not doing this of my volition. I'm doing this because I'm compelled to do it by forces that are vastly beyond my cognitive powers, but I know they're there. And
It's like, can I just, sorry, I don't want to interject here, but really important that you said that. This drive, in the same way for me, is not coming from this.
no,
I have no control of that, and
yeah.
it's a fucking strong pull to need to go out and do this stuff. It's almost as if something's speaking through you and saying, "Look, and it's pushing you into to doing these things. So I this is again, I feel like, without trying to come across as some god complex or anything, because that's not really what I'm about, because that's again that's crazy. But like, there seems to be a deeper driving force that's beyond anything that even I can explain, that pushes me to express this information to people in the world. And the more and more I learn, the more and more I realize that logic and reason just can't be tampered with, and logic and reason never lies. Logic and reason should always be the primary decision maker and the primary philosophy for anybody trying to understand anything. And so it seems logical for me, if there is an understanding of something that can create a level of appreciation, gratitude, and peace in the world in the way that I experience it, then there's a driving force that's beyond the me that experiences that, that needs to shine that into the world. And sometimes that does not come across nice to people. And I don't think Jesus was nice to people a lot of the time in the same way. I don't even think the Buddha was nice to people in a lot of the same way. In fact, the Buddha was very triggering to a lot of people if you read some of the scriptures. You know, for instance, the story of the market guy, his son followed the Buddha and he meditated with him and all these things. And the father goes up and said, "You are wasting my son's life. You should be learning to be a merchant." And the Buddha just smiled at him. I mean, that guy would have took that as insolence. He would have seen that as like, "Oh my God, how dare he smile at me? Like, who does he think he is?" Because his ego is projecting. And he spat in the Buddha's face. Um, After a few days of thinking about it, it felt bad. He goes back to apologize to the Buddha and he walks up and he said, "A few days ago, I came and I spat in your face. And it was wrong of me to do so. I can see that what you're trying to do is good. Will you forgive me?" And the Buddha just smiled again and said, "No, I can't forgive you." And then the man's looking surprised, and all of his disciples look shocked. What? The Buddha can't forgive anybody? Like,
Never condemned him in the first place.
yeah, well, he never exactly. He said, "Bring the man before me of which spat in my face, and I shall forgive him."
Yeah.
Because he was so in tune with the present moment. He had none of these programs running. There was no 3 days ago getting spat on his face. As soon as he wiped it off, it was gone. And
So
that is that driving force there has to use philosophy in order to express that level of attunement to other people. And Jiddu Krishnamurti called it the speaker, you know.
yes, the speaker, that thing
Mhm.
that is doing all this. And so you mentioned, going outside and seeing the sunshine and feeling the life and joy, and you've got all these things to do and everything. Well, I made, several videos today, and in one of them, I say exactly that. I'm always saying that. I'm always saying, I'm speaking about the kingdom of God, and I'm saying, do you know what I'm speaking about? Have you any idea? But not a single person has ever said, I know what you mean. Yes, or is it like this, or is it like that, or could you speak more about that, or could you teach us more about that? They just don't have the fucking head for it. And I'm like, I just, I am actually now absolutely befuddled. I'm bedazzled. I am completely perplexed as to what is going on in their fucking minds. And now, to answer your question as to why I do it, well, it depends what you're calling who is I. If you're asking Aaron Berry, the ego, why he's doing it, well, because the spirit has been um, asked to do it. The consciousness on whole, spirit on a whole, is working through my body and doing what it's been doing with such intensity and such regularity for so long. It really is like I'm evangelist preaching, the word. I'm actually an evangelist for consciousness and for spirit. And it isn't Aaron Berry, the ego, the man, the human. And when I was writing my book, in the very, very early few pages, you might remember reading, I said, Aaron Berry isn't writing this book.
Hmm.
Spirit is writing this book. Spirit wanted me to write this book for years. And I was always going, well, when do you want me to write this fucking book then? You know, because it's going to take a long fucking time. And, you know, I don't know what to write and this, that, and the other. And then Spirit told me, okay, start writing that book. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to say. You know, there's so much. There's
But
14 years. Let me continue, Guy, because you're going to go on for a long
yeah,
time, aren't you? Unless it's going to be short. Otherwise, you can break my flow. Yeah. So, writing the book, not knowing what to actually say until the voice says, just start writing. Who is it that says these things? I don't know, spirit. So I put the computer on and then I started to write. And then all of a sudden it was just free flow. And it was a solid free flow for 8 months with 5 hours every single day. And that book, 235,000 words or something like that. And so that happened with that. And my memory, my recall about all these scenarios, they were all seemingly perfectly stored in my mind. And every single astral projection, every single entheogen account, every single supernatural, I remember the details down. And it was such a release. It was such a pleasure to unload those, to put it down. And with my videos, I wake up in the morning and instantly there's a theme there. And the theme is this, that, and the other. And the voice in my head says, tell them this, tell them that. And you sleep.
no, I'm listening, mate. I'm just I'm engaged in what you're saying. No, I'm not asleep. I'm not asleep. No, I'm just what it is. Look, when you say spirit's working through you, and you know you got this voice saying, "Tell them this, tell them that." I can't get the thing like so. Spirit, I believe, is working through everybody. It's trying to be the voice through everybody. And if it comes through you more effectively because you've removed those boundaries that we've been talking about, then it's trying to get and communicate to the spirit that's trying to work through other people. There's supposed to be a reciprocal thing. And I think that's what the driving force is there. And I think so everyone has the spirit trying to get through the crud. So if your spirit gets through the crud more because you've done the work, then it's trying to reach the spirit of the one that's blocking its flow. Problem is, there's the block, and that's why people are not engaging because they're blocked.
Yeah.
And so how do you get past the block? And this is the age-old question, isn't it? You have to use philosophy on words that resonate beyond the block in order to erode the block. And sometimes that doesn't come across easy, does it? Sometimes that comes across as things that have to trigger in order for that to happen. But at the same time, a lot of that triggering will only, in some people, will only build up the defense. It'll only instill the defense. It'll kind of, they'll double down. And if you find yourself doubling down, then that should be an indicator to you if you've got some kind of metacognition enough to look at the way that the mind is operating. Then you go, oh, yeah, I'm doubling down on this. Like I'm really, really like. A lot of people are not going to be able to accept that, and I think that's why when you said that there's only a few people that are going to benefit from the channel, and you're probably going to get a lot of negativity from people, or you just non reaction from people. And that's where it is. I just don't think people are strong enough or aware enough to remove those boundaries. And I think spirit is desperately trying, whoever this spirit is, to reach people, and it selects certain people to do that. We see it through history, through your Jesuses and
It
your
selects certain
Thoths
people
and
to do
your
it. Look, Guy, I'm always saying every day, I'm not bashful. I'm not self-effacing. I'm not afraid of offending people. That's the whole thing about what I say. I tell people every day that Jesus was just one of a whole myriad, and he was the forerunner. Myself. The Buddha and Krishna and all these Jiddu Krishnamurti, these sort of people, you even in it, this thin line of consciousness. When we enter into that thin line of consciousness, we just know it. We just know it. We just feel it. We just are it. Why is it that only a very, very few of us enter that thin band of consciousness? And then when you enter into that, well, you absolutely know what Buddha was on about. You absolutely know what Jesus was on about. You absolutely understand the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and the real meaning in the Bible and all that. You just know it because you are it. And so I say to people, okay, look, I'm telling you now, I'm being very provocative, and I'm telling you that I have been speaking to you guys now for a solid 14 years. I have done thousands of videos, millions of words. Jesus was only around for 2 years, and if you compiled every single word he ever said, then it doubtlessly wouldn't even be as long as my book. And so everybody's got Jesus on the pedestal for being something that he actually wasn't, because I've studied what Jesus said and I can't find any place at all where he told anybody how to do anything.
No.
He never instructed them into do anything, Guy. And if he did, he wasn't put in the books. Now, when I mentioned to you before about the apostles, and the only apostle, even his closest of comrades, the only one other than Mary Magdalene, who she was supposed to be in receipt of all the information, and all the other apostles were jealous of her. But Judas was took aside and told a few things because he knew that the others would never be ready. And so when you're dealing with that level, with like Russian dolls with inside Russian dolls with inside Russian dolls, it just goes to show how incredibly difficult it is to reach the masses. You're only ever going to reach a very, very few when their conscious spirit is ready. Now, lots of people through the years have said, look, I love your videos because you are saying the things I'm thinking. But I'm not articulate like you, and I couldn't do what you do, but I'm really glad that you say it because it makes me feel less insane. Well, that's because he's in the vibration or she's in the vibration. We're in this realm. And I speak to a guy in Australia. Australia? Yes, Australia. And, he's been sectioned and been on meds and this, that, and the other for thinking in very, very peculiar ways, according to lots of people. But it's a fine line between genius and madness.
Yeah,
And
tell me about it.
when I go and see my psychiatrist, who, just in case anybody doesn't know, I commissioned, I requested. So I see the psychiatrist at my behest. So it's not like I'm being sent to a psychiatrist because I'm a nutter, anything like that. No, I arrange for the therapist, and I arrange for the psychiatrist. I arrange for everything. And so when I go and see these, they are dumbfounded, and they say that I'm a very peculiar case, because there's no illness, there's no condition that's in any of these manuals like DSM. No. And I say to him, I said, look, the reason why what I'm speaking about isn't in any of those books is because society hasn't evolved enough to put them in. But when society finally gets a grip and acknowledges what people have been speaking about for hundreds of thousands of years, and they've wrote books, 2,000 years ago at least, the spiritual awakening experience and how that affects the body. When you start to take that seriously, then you'll know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think then, I suppose it don't matter what I think, because the truth is beyond thinking, and whatever you think about the world is just arbitrary noise inside of the little chatterbox up here. And when the chatterbox quietens down and spirit gets to, or consciousness itself gets to become the forefront of experience, if for lack of a better term, then I think that the way I'm trying to visualize it, I'm trying to explain it in a way that people might understand. Imagine there's two waterfalls and there's an empty pit, right? And the water's coming off the waterfall and it keeps being filled up in a bucket and thrown away, filled up in a bucket, thrown away, filled up in a bucket and thrown away, right? And one person removes the waterfall and it falls into the river, into the channel, yeah? And it tries to find its way, and the other waterfall, right, is blocked. So in the same way, consciousness itself is prior or fundamental. And when you remove your block and you stop blocking the flow, those two waterfalls now start to flow in the same river. And consciousness expands, it develops, and it's an intelligence. It is something that we can't comprehend, because to us, in order to comprehend it, you just end up at pure nothing, because the ego doesn't have the capacity to comprehend what this is. So it just seems like nothing. But that's because maybe there's something deeper than that. But so throughout history, we see people that drop this and become essentially dead while they're still alive. And look, when you go to Christianity, right, and you get these messages that when you die, if you don't sin, you enter the kingdom of heaven and it's pure and everlasting peace. Well, first of all, this idea that if you're a good person that you go to hell, and you're a bad person, a good person you go to heaven, bad person go to hell. Those are just that was never really discussed in that way in Gnosticism. That was post Gnosticism. That's when Christianity developed. But the Gnostic texts didn't really point to that. So when we look at death, right? Death can happen when the body is physically dead, but it can also happen while the body's physically alive. The Buddhists call enlightenment the death before dying, right? So when you are dead and the body's still alive, it's everlasting peace and happiness. When you're dead, and your body's not alive, it's everlasting peace and happiness. So heaven then is a state of consciousness that we experience both in life and in death. And there doesn't need to be a fancy afterlife and spirits roaming around and St. Peter stood at his gate, asking the nuns if they've ever touched a penis before they can allow them into heaven or whatever, right? It's the absence of mind, whether dead or alive, is pure peace and happiness, because it's only the mind that causes suffering, isn't it? So how do we then speak to a person and cut through the crud in order for the dead self, or the true self, right, to respond and have a better chance at getting through, so consciousness can merge and grow and evolve? Because every spiritual enlightened being, there's a pull for them to speak to other people, unless even people say that, like Sri Ramana Maharishi, for instance, a silent yogi. Well, he never tried to speak to anybody, because he'd only be teaching people that that's just an ego thing. He'd be giving people information to inflate their egos with. But he did speak, and he did write a book, and in his own way, whether it was through silence, he was trying to tell people this very same message, just as the Buddha was, just as Jesus was, just as Horus was, and Thoth, and all of the historical enlightened beings. And it's not a mystical thing. It's not like a magical, fantastical thing. It's actually pretty damn, simple. And so I would just say to people, if you truly want to experience peace and happiness in your life, you've got to develop at first, before the enlightenment. You don't look for enlightenment because it would be the ego looking for enlightenment and it can't attain it. But you can develop a metacognition and learn to understand how the mind responds, and then give yourself time for the mind to go quiet through meditation, through spiritual practice, until eventually the gaps between the thinking become longer and longer until you can experience a type of bliss that is beyond thinking. And then if that happens for long enough and the gaps get longer, a recognition will happen where the ego just dismantles itself. There's no killing the ego. There's no the ego's evil and it must die or anything like that. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that first, a metacognition is, I think, an essential part of awakening, because now you can look at the way that the mind is operating as if it's a third person, because it really is essentially not you. It is not necessarily a third person, but it is the persona. It's the person. It's not really. It's just. I mean, how do you even define it? What's the substance of it? How do you equate it? You can't
What, the ego?
condense it. Yeah, you can't really condense it into anything other than a constantly changing energy of ideas and thoughts and beliefs and all
Yeah.
these crazy things. There's no single unit there, but yet that's like clouds constantly evolving and moving in front of the sun, right? They're never the same. They're always changing, just like your videos are always changing every single day. But the sun always remains pure and it shines its light. That doesn't change, right? Metaphorically. So in order for consciousness to shine through, we have to clear up the clouds. But you can't purposely try to clear up the clouds. There's work involved, and there's metacognition involved, and you've got to do some level of work in order to realize that actually there's no work required to do any of these things. And when you finally stop trying, then it's there. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think that's
well, I mean, for instance, Eckhart Tolle's story. Super depressed for many, many years, at the point of suicide, incessantly thinking about suicide, until one day he just got out of bed and everything had lifted. And all of a sudden he felt the joy and he noticed things and all these different sorts of stuff. And so that was a spontaneous thing that happened with him. With me, it was brought about by the situation, which was much more violent, of course, the shooting in Africa, which made me have to look at what I was and what I was doing, because I'd come close to death on that night, and I had to question everything about what I was and who I was, and what the fucking hell was I doing over there, in what was a godforsaken hellhole. And so, who who of us have the pleasure or the grace of receiving something like that, which then went on to be a very deep and profound, dull experience, but an enthralling, interesting, inspiring, tearful one, all different sorts of emotions and everything, for 7 solid years, where I could barely even, get out of bed, and I was very reclusive. And then, of course, it went on for another 7 years. So 14 years, that's what the book's all about. And during that journey, I learned an enormous amount, reading thousands of books. And of course, that was after I'd done global traveling, and I'd been all around the world, fucking 20 times. And so I'm trying to impart something which the vast majority of people will simply never ever experience.
no.
And so, this is the dilemma. And those who haven't ever done any meditation, never will do any meditation, who will never take any DMT or mushrooms, well, they will never ever see what I'm trying to convey.
Mm.
And so it's absolutely futile. And this is why they just completely don't get what I'm saying. And so, okay, well, what do I do? I've got something to say. I'm compelled to say something. I've got to say it. Hopefully, YouTube won't destroy this channel and all these videos, which will be invaluable for people for many, many years to come. Someone says to me, look, I know you get very frustrated with the present, but just imagine that you are kind of like a prophet. You're foretelling the future or something. And whatever you're laying down now is going to be discovered, realized, and appreciated like 50 years or 100 years from this time. And I go, well, that rings so true with Jesus, with the Buddha, with all the philosophers we've ever known. When they wrote their books, they never sold a freaking copy at that particular time. Schopenhauer never sold a single copy, barely, until 40 years after his death. And so Nietzsche, barely sold a copy. The only people that bought his book, the ones that were so embarrassed because they knew him, they were friends, but he sold very, very few. He had to go round, all the people he knew and everything, but now someone's gotten hold of the rights and they promote it and they've got the money behind it. Then all of a sudden, everyone knows about Nietzsche and people pretend they know what he was talking about. But the fact of it is, nobody comprehends these people's minds. Nobody knew what they was really saying. It's all interpretation. Oh, well, what Nietzsche meant here and what Jesus meant there. Please stop it. And don't anybody ever try and state what other people meant. You've got no idea. All you can ever do is just say, well, I interpret it this way. That works for me and it seems quite useful. Don't be projecting any shit onto anybody else just because you think you're wiser than somebody else. And so this is it at the end of the day. But what I can say and what I do know is throughout the years, there's been many people who have really tuned in to what I've been saying. And back in the day, we used to have loads of people having these sorts of conversations. There are very, very different times. Now those times are gone. And we've all grown up, you see. That's the thing. 20 years ago, well, I was much younger, of course, and we all had different ways of life, and we had more time to convene together and spend hours because we never had kids and all this different sort of thing. And now, of course, 20 years ago, we never had this massive influx of distraction where we do now. And it's just a massive information. It's like what you say, you do fantastic art and you try to show people, the inception of it and this, that, and the other. No one's interested. It's just like, oh, just show me the end. Just show me the end. Oh, yeah, that's all right. And then they don't want to appreciate anything. They will never appreciate anything. They don't have the consciousness to appreciate anything. And so, therefore, then they get what they deserve. They get a very mediocre life of being automated and being slaves. And probably they will die before their indentured slavery has actually come to fruition.
Oh, sounds like a conclusion to me.
Yeah.
Mm. Interesting
Well, yeah,
chat.
we've done 2 hours and 15, 16 minutes. And so, yeah, it was very refreshing to have a conversation with someone that's pretty firm in what they know, um, because that's a rare thing.
Mm. I like the conversations when we can, disagree on some things because it's this is interesting for me. Uh, I like the explorative aspect of learning and growing and just seeing uh, the way that all this stuff's manifesting differently between you and me, and so it's interesting. I like and I've always said that I've always respected somebody that I can disagree with and still be incredibly good friends with. So yeah, I appreciate the talk, mate. It's great, and I agreed with him for the most part, obviously, but yeah, it's been really interesting. I think it should be good. I have considered, taking up a couple of maybe getting back on YouTube because I know there was a time where when I disappeared and there was like, "Where's Guy gone?" And I don't know. I think if I'd have carried that on, it might have been an even more interesting journey. But it's probably better as well that I even waited to a point where I feel a bit older and a bit wiser and a little bit more balanced now. I have a better vocabulary. I have a better way of speaking, and a lot of that's through engaging with you as well. I've learned a lot from that. So maybe I'll make a couple of videos myself exploring a few of these topics, and yeah, so
Well,
I'll look
if
at
you
it.
get the inspiration, that's the thing. If you don't get the inspiration, then you can't force this stuff.
Mm.
It has to be inspired, and when it's inspired, it's very very fluid. So you see your outlet. You already have an outlet, and you probably exhaust that each day whilst you're tattooing. You're running over the thoughts that you've been pondering, and you've got a captured audience. And even if they're not interested in it, well, they're going to hear it anyway.
Well, the
Because what's
amount of
the
people
option?
that, yeah, no, they get to hear it, but the amount of people that say, "Oh, mate, what you say is really interesting. You should start a YouTube channel and all this stuff." And I'm like, yeah,
Well,
it's just the time.
yeah, but you don't need to do anything different. You see, all you need to do is set up your camera, train it on yourself, and then just do the talking. And they don't have to talk; they don't have to say anything. But
Well,
you know,
I actually do because I run live streams while I'm working on TikTok. TikTok, I found it helps me reach more clients a bit better, and I got a really good community going on TikTok, and I do go into these topics. In fact, people know I'm a little bit of a conservative-minded individual, or a logically-minded individual, which is classed as conservatism these days, or even right-wing, which is crazy to me. But
mm,
and I did put word out for to do some podcasts with some other artists, talk about things, and I even had a response. Oh, I hope you're going to be nice to me. I'm a bit of a liberal, and it's like I'm fine with that. Yeah, if you've got that viewpoint, I'll talk to you, and we'll go through what you believe, and
as
you might get
long
triggered.
as you are capable of hearing another opinion, you see, that's the thing. And most liberals aren't. They're so transfixed on their fragile opinion of the world. And the reason why it's so fragile because it just doesn't stand up with
Mm.
scrutiny, and they know that, and that's why they get hysterical. The liberalist answer to everything is to become hysterical and just say that's because I want it like that, and it's my
Yeah,
right to be emotional about it. Well,
I get
just
called
because
a
you're emotional
I
about
get
it doesn't
called a
mean it's
Nazi. I get called a fascist. I remember. Yeah, did I tell you when I tattooed a portrait of Charlie
Listen,
Kirk
let
after he
me tell
died?
you, you're lucky. You're lucky. You get called those things. I have to call them myself. I have to call myself a Nazi. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I get caught, but I get a lot of love as well. And but yeah, I've had quite a bit of controversy surrounding my views, and a lot of people see me as quite far right, and I'm not far right at all. I'm actually quite a centrist, and the reason I'm a centrist is because everything that I speak of comes from a state of balance. It comes from a state of logical balance. I always try to employ the three laws of logic in my arguments, and that's something I've been learning about is logical fallacy and all this kind of stuff. I've always known that to a degree, but now I'm learning to actually articulate it with the correct phrases and all these types of things, and sharpen my debate skills and all these things. But yeah, it's just like, but I do get this. But the thing with the liberal, I say liberal, not even necessarily just liberal, the far left or the woke mindset is that you cannot have conversations with these people with anything that they disagree with, because unless they get constant validation in their worldview, the only
Mhm.
thing that they've got, because the arguments are very weak, is hate towards you. And that's a very dangerous thing. That's Marxism at work. And
Which is contrary to what they is supposed to stand for, which is liberalism. And this is the whole paradox of politics these days, isn't it? Because what's actually happened is that the conservatives or the Republicans are more liberal now than the Democrats and the socialists on our end.
that's
And
why I
so
say I'm an old school liberal.
yeah, and so
Sometimes.
lots of people, when they speak about being liberal, like Joe Rogan, he'd say, yeah, he's liberal from back in the day, when liberalism meant liberalism. Now liberalism means agree with me, otherwise we're going to call you a Nazi bastard and
Yeah.
get really evil on you and try and ruin your fucking lives. Wow. Okay, bro. Well, it's getting late now. So that was, yeah, fascinating, mate. And so we'll have to do it, more often.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate everyone watching. Thank you. Leave a comment, see what you think. I'd be interested to respond to a couple, see what you think about the whole conversation. Share your views. You know, I'd engage with you. Yeah, thanks a lot. And like and subscribe to the channel. Not
Yeah, the
because
thing
we're
is,
asking you
the
to.
sad thing is that we've been speaking for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and there's probably no one that's actually gonna ever get to the end, or if they do get to the end, they're gonna skip to the end and miss the nuts and bolts of the whole conversation.
They'll just skip to the bits that sound concerning and then get a false idea about what we've actually said, take it the wrong way and say, "Oh, he said this and he said that," and they'll just
Yep.
clip it out of
But,
context.
at
That's what they
least we've
do,
had the
you know?
conversation. The information's gone out into the Akasha, so we're doing our part
Yeah,
as enlightened servants for
yeah,
cosmic consciousness.
yep. Cheers, mate. Anyway, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much.
much, mate. Have a good night.
You too, pal. Thank you.